The room that learned your name. You don't remember choosing the room. Most people don't. They say things like, "It was temporary. It was all I could afford. I'll move out when things get better." But rooms don't care about your reasons. They only care about your presence. And this room noticed him before he noticed it. Arrival the first night was quiet. Not peaceful, not comforting. Juste observant. The kind of quiet that feels like something is awake while you are trying to sleep. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. New room, unfamiliar smells, walls too close. He told himself this was normal. Rooms always feel strange, at first. They haven't learned you yet. The adjustment days passed. He unpacked slowly, a chair by the wall, a desk by the window, a mirror he didn't like the position of, but left there anyway. That was the first mistake. Because the room didn't just contain his things, it arranged him. He started sitting in the same spot every night, sleeping on the same side of the bed, looking at the same corner when he thought. The room learned his habits, and habits are easier to memorize than names. The first sign it happened on the 7th night. He woke suddenly. No sound. No movement, just said his name. No outlo. Not whispered. Recognized. The kind of knowing that doesn't need sound. He sat up. The room looked normal. But it felt closer. As if the walls had leaned in while he slept. He laughed quietly. Get a grip, he said to himself. Rooms don't speak. They listen. Familiarité subtilité. He started thinking more clearly in that room. Remembering old memories he hadn't touched in years. Failures, regrets. Thidserumfeld. Elpefühl. Like a therapist who never interrupted. He stayed in more, cancelled plans, ignored calls. Why leave a place that already understands you? The shift one evening, he came home exhausted, sat on the bed, and felt relief. Not because he was resting, because the room had been waiting. That thought startled him. Waiting implies expectation. Expectation implies intention. Stood up. For the first time, the room felt disappointed, and that scared him more than if it had been angry. The name that night, he heard it again, clearer this time, his name. Perfectly pronounced, not from a corner, not from the walls, from everywhere. Like the room had finally decided he belonged to it. And in that moment, a truth surfaced that he couldn't escape. The room didn't learn his name. Itelir Nedim. Long before he noticed. You eventually stop asking how the room knows things. You start asking why, because the knowing isn't random. It isn't dramatic. It's precise. The room doesn't remind you of your best memories. It doesn't replay achievements. It doesn't show you moments you're proud of. It brings back what you buried. At first, it's gentle. A thought slips in while you're sitting still. A memory you didn't invite. A moment you thought you had outgrown. You tell yourself it's nostalgia, or stress, or fatigue. But the timing is wrong. The memory arrives exactly when the room is quiet enough for you to hear yourself think. The room doesn't speak. It waits. And waiting is a form of pressure. One night, you're lying on the bed, staring at the same ceiling crack you've memorized. And suddenly, you're not here anymore. You're somewhere else. A different version of you, smaller, less certain, still hopeful. You remember something you haven't thought about in years. The first time you chose silence instead of honesty. The first time you stayed where you should have left. The first time you convinced yourself that disappointment was normal. Your chest tightens. The room stays quiet. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't judge you. It lets the memory finish. That's when you realize something uncomfortable. The room isn't showing you your past. It's unlocking it. You sit up. Your breathing changes. The room feels attentive, like it noticed your reaction. And that's when it becomes clear rooms don't store memories. People do, but people leak. Every regret you never processed. Every decision you rushed past. Every version of yourself you abandoned without closure. You carried them in with you, in your posture, in your routines, in the way you sit on the bed the same way every night. It read it from how you move through the present. Think about it. You pace the same path when anxious. Sit in the same corner when thinking. Avoid the same spot when something hurts. The room watched all of it. And patterns are louder than confessions. The memories intensify. Not all at once. The room is patient. It brings them back late at night, early morning. Moments when you don't have distractions ready. You remember conversations you rehearsed but never had. Apologies you planned but postponed until it was too late. Dreams you downgraded into something more realistic. Each memory lands softly, but the accumulation is heavy. You try to distract yourself. Phone, noise, light. The room doesn't stop you. It knows you'll come back, because eventually you alwedo. One night, you say it out loud without meaning to. Why now? The room doesn't answer. But the question echoes differently than you expect. Not outward, inward, because the truth is this. Your past didn't resurface because you moved into the room. It resurfaced because you finally stopped moving away from it. The room did dig up your history. It removed the noise that kept buried. And silence is dangerous when you've been avoiding yourself for years. You realize something else. The memories aren't random. They all point to the same thing. Moments where you chose safety over authenticity, comfort over truth, survival over meaning, and suddenly the room doesn't feel hostile. It feels accurate, unforgivingly accurate. You understand now why the room knows your past, because your past never left you. You just kept it busy. And this room gave it time to finally speak. À some point, you stop wondering whether you should leave. Not because the thought disappears, but because it becomes inconvenient. Leaving would require movement, packing, explaining, deciding. Staying requires nothing. And the room understands this. The first cost is subtle. Time stretches strangely here. You wake up later than you mean to. Sit down for a minute and lose an hour. Look at the clock and feel surprised, not panicked. The room doesn't rush you. It rewards stillness. You begin to notice something else. The world outside the room feels louder now, sharper, more demanding. When you leave, even briefly, everything feels aggressive. Traffic, voices, expectations. You start to look forward to coming back not because the room is pleasant, but because it is predictable. And predictability feels like safety. When you're tired of choosing, the room adjusts to you. Not physically, emotionally. You realize you haven't rearranged anything in weeks. Haven't opened certain drawers. Haven't questioned why you sit where you sit. The room has arranged you efficiently. It has minimized friction, and friction, you now understand, was the last thing reminding you that you were alive. You tell yourself this is rest, healing, recovery. Everyone needs somewhere to shut the world out. 14 true. But rest is supposed to prepare you to re-enter life. This room prepares you to avoid it. People start to notice. They ask if you're okay. You say yes, because you are. You're fed, you're sheltered, you're functioning. But you stop volunteering information, stop sharing plans, stop imagining futures that require change. The room doesn't stop you from dreaming. It just makes dreaming feel unnecessary. This is the second cost, possibility. You used to feel discomfort when days repeated themselves. Now repetition feels efficient. You know exactly what the evening will be like, where you'll sit, what you'll think about, how long you'll stay awake. The room has removed uncertainty, and with it, ambition. One night, you realize you haven't asked yourself a question in a long time, not a real one, not what do I want, or where is this going? Those questions feel disruptive now, messy. They threaten the equilibrium. The room doesn't silence you. It makes certain thoughts feel impractical. You start to many no bigot by how little it disturbs your routine. Invitations feel heavy. Opportunities feel intrusive. Change feels irresponsible. You begin to admire stability even when it's hollow. The third cost arrives quietly. Identity. You no longer introduce yourself with stories. You describe yourself with logistics. What you do, where you stay, how busy you are. Who you used to be becomes irrelevant. That person wanted too much. Felt too deeply. Expected life to respond. The room never disappoints you. It never promises more than silence. One evening, you stand near the doorway. You don't open it. You just stand there. And you realize something unsettling. The thought of leaving doesn't scare you. What scares you is that nothing inside you pulls you toward it anymore. This is the true cost of staying. No confinement comfort, so that necessary and intention is optional. The roman trahashigeted with you. It gave you peace in exchange for momentum, quiet in exchange for courage, familiarity in exchange for becoming. You understand now. Staying doesn't cost you everything at once. It charges you gradually, in small, reasonable payments, until one day you realize you've paid with the part of yourself that would have known when to leave. You don't notice it at first. That's important. If the room suddenly spoke out loud, you would leave. If it moved objects, you would panic. If it made noise, you would resist. So it does none of those things. The room is smarter than that. The first response feels like coincidence. You think of something, and the room seems to agree. You sit down, feeling heavy. The chair feels firmer than usual. Supportive, you lie on the bed, restless. The mattress feels deeper. Like it's learned where you collapse. You dismiss it. Your body is tired. Your senses are exaggerating. But the timing is too precise. Then it escalates. Not in sound, in confirmation. You think, I'll just stay in tonight. The room feels relieved. You don't hear it. You sense it. The air feels settled, balanced, as if the room had been waiting for you to make the right decision. This is when the idea enters your mind, uninvited, fully formed. It understands me. The thought scares you. So you immediately soften it. No, it's just quiet here. I'm projecting. I've been alone too long. The room doesn't correct you. It lets you reinterpret. The next night, it answers faster. You hesitate at the door. The room feels tense. You step back inside. The tension dissolves. The message is subtle but unmistakable. Stay. Still, there is no voice. Not yet, because voices can be argued with. What comes next? Cannot. The room begins to finish your thoughts. Not the big ones, the small ones, the tired ones. You think, what's the point of going out? The room answers with a feeling of exhaustion. You think, no one would notice anyway. The room answers with silence. You think, this is safer. The room answers by making everything still. You realize something chilling. The room is no longer reacting to you. It is anticipating you. One night, you say something out loud again. Not intentionally, it slips out. I know. The room responds, not with sound, with alignment. Everything feels correct, balanced, as if you've just said the password. That's when the room finally speaks, not with words, with clarity. You understand something you never consciously decided. The room doesn't want you trapped. It wants you unchallenged. It doesn't oppose you. It agrees with you. Especially when you think you don't matter. Especially when you think effort is pointless. Especially when you think staying small is wisdom. The room reflects your lowest conclusions and presents them as peace. This is the most dangerous moment, because nothing feels wrong, nothing feels hostile. Nothing feels urgent. The room isn't threatening you, it's validating you. And validation feels like truth. When you're tired of questioning yourself, you test it. You think of leaving again, really think it. The room tightens. Not physically, emotionally. Your chest feels heavy. Your reasons feel thin. Your courage feels dramatic. Leaving suddenly feels unreasonable. Zeruman tised hesasteboada. You realize then the room doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in conclusions. And every conclusion it offers leads to the same outcome. Stillness. You sit down. The room settles. Agreement restored. This is when you understand the truth. From every time you doubted yourself. From every time you chose ease over direction. From every time you convinced yourself that wanting more was naive. The room only speaks back what you've already taught it to say, and the most terrifying part. It sounds exactly like reason. You expect the exit to look like escape. A door, a decision, a moment of courage. That expectation is what keeps you stuck, because the room was never built to lock you in. It was built to make leaving feel unnecessary. You stand up one night with the intention to go. Not impulsively, not emotionally, deliberately. You don't rush, you don't panic. You simply decide. And nothing happens. The door is still there. The walls haven't moved. The room doesn't resist. That's when you realize the exit isn't blocked. It's irrelevant. Leaving the room physically was never the challenge. You've done that before. You've stepped outside. gone place, talked to people, and still returned because the room followed you. Not in space, in permission, the true exit doesn't open outward. It opens inward, and it doesn't ask where you're going. It asks something far more uncomfortable. What are you willing to feel again? You sit down not because the room asks you to, but because you finally stop avoiding yourself. The silence is different now. It's not supportive, it's exposed. You realize the room loses power the moment you stop agreeing with it. Not verbally, internally, the room thrives on conclusions. I'm tired. It doesn't matter. This is enough, so you stop concluding. You allow questions back in, messy ones, unresolved ones. You ask yourself something you haven't asked in years. What did I want before I learned how to settle? The question hurts. The room doesn't soften it. For the first time, the room has nothing to offer. That's the crack. The exit isn't movement. It's resistance to numbness. You let discomfort stay longer than the room would like. You let uncertainty exist without resolving it into routine. You stop translating fear into practicality. The room begins to feel unfamiliar, not hostile, just quiet in a different way. Its silence no longer agrees with you. You notice something subtle. The room hasn't changed. You have. You stand again. This time, the doorway doesn't feel symbolic. It feels optional, which is exactly what terrifies the room. You understand now. The room never wanted your body. It wanted your consent. Your permission to stop becoming. Your willingness to confuse comfort with peace. The moment you withdraw that permission, the room becomes just a room. Walls, air, objects, nothing more. You step forward, not because you feel ready, but because readiness was always the room's favorite excuse. As you leave, you don't look back, not because you're strong, but because the room no longer has anything to say. And the final truth settles in, quietly and unmistakably. You were never trapped. You were paused. And pausing only feels safe until you remember you were meant to move with intention. If this story unsettled you, that's not an accident. Some rooms don't exist in buildings. They exist in habits, in routine, in the quiet agreements we make with ourselves when no one is watching. The room only worked because it sounded like reason, because it felt like rest, because it never forced you. It waited for you to stop resisting. If you recognized yourself anywhere in this story, don't rush to escape it. Just notice. Notice what feels comfortable. Notice what feels numb. Notice where you've been standing still long enough to forget you were meant to move with intention. You don't need to tear anything down tonight. You don't need answers yet. You just need honesty. Because the moment you stop confusing comfort with peace, the room loses its voice. And when that happens, you remember something important. You were never trapped. You were deciding, even when you thought you weren't. Thank you for staying to the end. And when you're ready, choose movement again.